When you're in a weak position, just living can be tough. It's the same whether you're out in the world or at home. For someone like me, weak and vulnerable, there's no such thing as a safe place. I was teased, belittled, and used as a stress reliever by everyone around me. By enduring this, I somehow justified my existence. I've waited for a miracle that seemed impossible, enduring pain and suffering. But now, I've decided to stop waiting, lift my head, and walk my own path without looking back. My name is Zoe. I'm 28 years old. For nearly a decade, I've been working in programming, mostly remotely. There's always a high demand for skilled programmers, so there's more than enough work to tire me out. I manage multiple teams and oversee operations. The person once seen as the weakest, the lowest, is now a leader. Life really is unpredictable. Since I was young, I was mocked for being gloomy and introverted. This ridicule wasn't limited to my peers. At home, it was just the same. My brother Wesley especially looked down on me and made fun of me. When he left for college after graduating high school, I felt a deep sense of relief. After finishing high school myself, I didn't pursue further education and instead retreated to my room. It was almost as if staying home was a trade-off for not continuing my studies. For years, I rarely left the room, accumulating experience and achievements. My mom and Wesley then and now have always looked down on me and ridiculed me. But my dad was different. It's hard to believe he married someone as mean as my mom. He was that kind of gentle person. In tough and sad times, I would snuggle up to my dad at the pub he ran and cry. The pub was a small establishment on the ground floor of our house, and he managed it alone. "It's okay, Zoe, just hang in there. Your luck will turn around eventually," he'd say. I could tell he was trying to convince himself of the same thing. The pub wasn't thriving, often running at a deficit. This left my dad unable to stand up to my mom, who worked a corporate job. The building was rented, costing $3,000 a month in rent. 3 years ago, when my work started to take off, I took over the rent payments. I'll never forget the look of surprise on my dad's face when I offered to take care of the rent. It was the first time I saw him smile like that, tearfully expressing his gratitude. To support my dad's business, I worked harder than ever. I believe it was then that I grew most as a programmer. Working became a way of repaying my dad. I was truly happy about that. Dad passed away suddenly from an illness about 6 months ago. The pain of his loss hasn't healed even a bit. I can still cry rivers, but I couldn't just keep crying. After Dad's death, Wesley, who had always been at odds with him, came back home. Wesley had married a few years back. His wife's name is Hannah. She's a perfect match for a mean-spirited Wesley, sly and with a sharp tongue. In the house without Dad, Wesley and his wife started acting as if they owned the place. "Hey, Zoe, still cooped up in your room, messing with your computer? Creepy." "Oh, that's not nice, Wesley." Poor Zoe. When Wesley and his wife start teasing me, Mom joins in, attacking me too. Mom, now retired, spends all day at home doing nothing. Every time she sees me, she clicks her tongue, muttering that I should just leave. "I wish you had taken Zoe with you, Dad." Every snide joke from Mom, every moment of feeling alienated at home, made me think there's no reason for me to stay here anymore. I need to leave as soon as possible. I'll live for myself, especially now that I don't have a single ally left at home. After Dad's passing, every time Wesley sees me around the house, he clicks his tongue. So does Hannah. Needless to say, so does Mom. They ignore me completely, even eating separately. Mom is actually my foster mother. My biological mother died in a traffic accident before I was old enough to remember. I call my foster mom, Mom, but it's just out of necessity. Wesley is my stepbrother. There's no blood relation between him, me, or Dad. That's probably why Mom and Wesley can be so cold to me. After Dad's death, Wesley and his wife took over the pub. They had always been interested in the food and beverage industry. However, without any hesitation, they closed down Dad's pub. Then, in a selfish move, Wesley and his wife remodeled the place into a cafe. Wesley helps out on weekends while working his regular job. With Hannah as the manager, to cover the cafe's remodeling costs, Wesley used Dad's inheritance without consulting me. I usually keep quiet, but I got angry. That money was supposed to be for me too, right? How can you just use it all without asking? Don't raise your voice like that, introvert. From that moment, Wesley's malicious attacks on me got worse. They made it clear they wanted me gone, overtly treating me like an enemy. This moocher, get out now. Just looking at you makes me sick. It's like looking at a slug. Of course, Mom joined in on the momentum. Yes, get out. Moochers are a nuisance. I was utterly disgusted by their ignorance and arrogance, and so I started preparing to move out immediately, hoping they'd all go to hell. I found a nice apartment, signed the lease, and moved my belongings. I even bought myself a new computer as a moving-in gift. On the last day at home, I said to the three of them, "From now on, you'll need to handle the rent yourselves. I won't be paying it." Wasn't this place owned by our parents? Wesley's stupidity never ceased to amaze me. I didn't even feel like laughing. Mom, wanting to stay on the strong end, acted like she didn't care. The rent is $3,000 a month. I hope the cafe sales can cover it. Wait, Zoe, you're paying $3,000 a month? Seeing how shocked Wesley was, I decided to enlighten them. Over the past decade, working as a programmer, I started my own company. Currently, it employs about 40 employees, all skilled programmers. Leading them, I've successfully managed various projects. Paying $3,000 a month was nothing for me. I plan to expand my business further from my new apartment. This move is a great opportunity to start something new. As I finished, Wesley, with a forced smile, started clapping. I didn't know that. Impressive, Zoe. You can stay here. What? Don't leave. You can stay here just like before, right? Mom, caught off guard, nodded in surprise. Yes, Wesley's right. No need for you to leave. I think so too. Wow, Zoe, I'm impressed. Changed my mind about you. The three of them completely changed their tune, knowing the amount of rent and my financial capability made them rethink, but it was too late for anything they said. I picked up my last bag and stood up. How foolish. Just so you know, I won't be helping out. Goodbye. Despite their attempts to hold me back, I left the house. Afterward, I began a new life in my spacious apartment, working by a bright window with a cup of coffee. No one complains. When I feel like a change of scenery, I can head to a nearby cafe. Realizing my newfound freedom, I gradually changed. I started wearing clothes I liked and changed my hairstyle. I began checking out places and items that caught my interest. My team members noticed, saying my voice sounded brighter, much to their delight. Apparently, I used to have a worryingly low and somber tone during meetings. My positive changes seemed to brighten up my employees as well. Meanwhile, I kept getting calls from Wesley. I ignored them, but Mom started calling too. I could have blocked them. I have no attachment to those three, but I didn't cut ties completely, just for a bit of payback. For instance, when I felt particularly down, I'd answer Wesley's calls. Wesley tried everything to appease me and lure me back home. His flattering tone was amusing. Mom was almost the same. "Please, let the past be the past," she said in a cloying voice. I listened to them, only to firmly reject them in the end. Return to my parents' home to live under the same roof with the three people I detest most in this world? Why would I willingly subject myself to such a miserable ordeal? Now the tables were completely turned. Hearing Wesley and Mom's reactions when I rebuffed them was amusing. I slowly enacted my revenge, recalling all the mean things they did to me. I learned a lot from talking to Wesley. It turns out Wesley and Hannah actually have a significant amount of debt. Most of it seems due to Wesley's gambling. He's underreported the amount to Hannah, a truly shady affair. Wesley got hooked on gambling in college. Hannah, uninterested in gambling, just loves shopping. According to Wesley, she has enough clothes, shoes, and bags to open a store. She constantly browses websites and buys whatever catches her eye. No matter how much they earn, it's never enough. A pitiful situation, and in their dire state, they continue their wasteful lifestyle. Utterly baffling. I got more details about Hannah from Mom. Despite living together, she hardly helps with the housework. She only washes her own laundry, leaving almost everything else to Mom. She never cleans, cooks, or tidies up unless told to. Just imagining the tense atmosphere in my parents' home was depressing. Also, the cafe's business was failing, constantly in deficit. Typically, it takes a cafe 6 months to a year to get on track. The funds miraculously obtained through a bank loan were gone in 3 months. They should have prepared at least 6 months' worth of funds. With hardly any customers at the cafe, the home atmosphere was constantly strained. Wesley and his wife's relationship is on the brink of collapse, Mom said, but that's none of my concern. Just support Wesley, then I said coldly before hanging up. Mom kept calling, each time asking me to come back. After all their insults, now they want to pretend it never happened. The audacity. Lately, Mom's been appealing to my emotions. Already in her 60s, she says she's in pain all over and finds daily chores difficult. When I asked if she meant I should come back to do the housework, she hastily denied it. According to Mom, just having me, her close daughter nearby without any reservations, is comforting to her. She says it's enough if I'm just there occasionally helping out. It was clear she was after my money. Of course, I didn't believe her words or feel obligated to comply. What was truly unpleasant was her invoking memories of my dad. Dad was kind. He must be pitying me now, Zoe. You're kind like Dad. You couldn't abandon your family. But bringing up Dad had the opposite effect. I knew how much Dad suffered because of Mom, a loser running an unprofitable shop. How many times have I heard him being called that? Mom, who once scorned me, now has no choice but to flatter me. If Dad were watching, he'd surely be laughing at her. If he pies anything, it's Mom's ugliness. I later informed Wesley that Mom had been bad-mouthing Hannah extensively at my parents' home. A battle between Mom and Hannah erupted. Now Mom apparently calls Hannah a moocher. Caught between the two, Wesley seems to be in a tough spot, though it was 2 months later when Hannah's affair came to light. Apparently, a man had approached her while she was alone in the cafe. The cafe business wasn't doing well, and the relationship with her mother-in-law was terrible. Wesley was in a bad mood too, feeling down for a while. She apparently gave in to the temptation. Naturally, Wesley was furious when he found out. In a sensible world, they would have calmly discussed their future, but foolish Wesley opted for a shock in the form of revenge. He too had an affair, both blaming each other. Wesley and his wife had a huge fight. The marital spat continued until a glass ornament thrown by Hannah hit Mom's foot. Mom ended up with a broken leg, taking months to heal, leaving her bedridden and unable to do housework. Feeling somewhat responsible, Hannah started doing the housework. But her inexperience led to inevitable mistakes. Small mistakes should be overlooked, but Mom took the opportunity to complain to Hannah. Typical harassment, criticizing her efficiency and the overly salty food. Hannah wanted to give up, but couldn't, her stress building up. Angry at Wesley for his affair and retaliation, and at herself for injuring her mother-in-law, unable to talk about divorce because of her duty to care for her injured mother-in-law, Hannah's mental state deteriorated. Wesley said she was now in a state of depression. Wesley suffered badly because of his affair for revenge. He ended up deeply resented by the partner of his affair. The partner was persistent, calling his home and workplace with harassment. As a result, Wesley had to leave his job. Unable to stay any longer, the settlement for the affair forced him into more debt. Unable to find a steady job quickly, he started working part-time. Warehouse logistics, cleaner, mover, delivery person. He's trying every job that seems feasible. Despite overworking, he says it's better than being at home. Being at home with Hannah and Mom's stares hurts. Better to work outside the house. Once noisy with couple fights and mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts was now eerily quiet because nobody willingly speaks to each other. Mom doesn't even want to see Wesley and Hannah's faces. Hannah doesn't want to meet her mother-in-law, and Wesley feels awkward talking to both of them. That seems to be the current state of affairs. They don't want to interact, yet they live together. It's nothing short of hellish, and I find it terrifying. Wesley, who shared all of these stories with me over the phone, asked me for money at the end of the call. I refused, of course. Lending them money would only encourage dependency, and I don't want to be involved in that. Relationships built on money disappear when the money runs out, and I wanted to cut ties there. Wesley said he would call again, so I set up his number to block. I also blocked Mom's number. I never registered Hannah's number. I don't answer calls from unknown or private numbers, so no worries there. The three of them, unable to pay rent, eventually dispersed. Mom moved into a retirement home, and Wesley and his wife divorced. Rumor has it that the building already has a new tenant. No one knows where Wesley and Hannah went. They're probably living modestly somewhere, slowly paying off their debts. As for me, I continue to enjoy my comfortable solo life. Work is going well, and I have a good relationship with my employees. Everything is perfect, but maybe there's a new twist ahead. A colleague introduced me to a man, and I've agreed to a date. He's a young entrepreneur. His eyes sharpen when he talks about work. A charming person. Until now, I've been solely focused on my job, never dating. It seems like that part of my life is coming to an end.
My name's Carrie, and if you're expecting a fairy tale, you might want to look elsewhere. My life's been anything but, starting from when I was just 3. That's when my mom decided she'd had enough of us, or maybe it was just Dad and me she'd had enough of. She took off with some guy she met at a bar, or so the story goes. Never much cared to get into the specifics, the outcome was the same either way. She was gone, leaving me and Dad to fend for ourselves. School was a trip. Kids can be real jerks, especially when they sniff out something they think they can use against you. "Hey, Carrie, gonna run off like your mom?" That was a popular one for a while. Or, "Guess it runs in the family, huh?" Whenever I'd mess up or get in trouble. Kids, right? "Don't let them get to you," Dad would say. "They don't know Jack." He had a way of making it seem like it was us against the world, which, I guess, it kinda was. My dad, Jack, he was a rock. Started out slinging hammers on construction sites, then clawed his way up to running his own gig. The man busted his back so I wouldn't want for anything. And I didn't, not really. He made damn sure of it. But there was always this hole, you know? No matter how many new shoes or gadgets he threw my way. Graduation was a blur of caps and gowns, and before I knew it, I was stepping onto a college campus. Fresh start, new faces. Nobody knew about my mom and her leaving. It was liberating. For the first time, I wasn't Carrie, the girl with the runaway mom. Just Carrie. College was like stepping into another world. Nobody gave two hoots about my past. My mom's story? Might as well have been ancient history. It was all about the here and now. Classes, parties, late-night cram sessions. I started to feel like I could leave that old version of myself behind. My self-esteem? Shot through the roof. I was making friends, acing classes, and for once, I didn't feel like I was playing catch-up with everyone else. One evening, I found myself at this dive bar with a bunch of classmates. The place was buzzing, the kind of hum that told you stories were being made. I was wedged into a booth with Sarah and Mike, nursing a beer and pretending I understood their debate about some philosophical crap. "So, Carrie," Mike slurred, turning his bleary eyes on me. "What's your story? You always dodge the question." Sarah elbowed him. "Lay off, man. Not everyone's an open book." I shrugged, the old anxiety nibbling at the edges of my newfound confidence. "Not much to tell. Grew up here, Dad's in construction. Came to college to get away from the same old. Life in college was a smooth ride, all things considered. Classes, friends, a couple of forgettable dates here and there. But nothing serious, you know? I was busy carving out a little slice of life for myself, away from the shadows of my past. And then, bam, Lucas happened. It was a typical Friday night. Sarah had dragged me to this house party, promising it'd be a blast. "Come on, Carrie, you need to get out more. Live a little," she'd said, practically pulling me out the door. The place was packed, music blasting, people everywhere. I was nursing my drink, feeling kind of out of my element, when Lucas bumped into me. Literally. Spilled his drink down my front. "Shit, I'm so sorry," he blurted, eyes wide, a look of genuine horror on his face. "Great, just what I needed," I muttered, dabbing at my shirt with some napkins he'd handed me. "Let me make it up to you." Another drink? On me, obviously. He offered, still looking mortified but hopeful. I eyed him, taking in his messy hair and the earnest look in his eyes. Sure, why not? Can't get worse, right? That drink turned into 3, and before I knew it, we were holed up in a corner, talking like we'd known each other for years. Lucas was easy to talk to. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. So, Carrie, what's your deal? You always hang out at parties looking like you'd rather be anywhere else? He teased, nudging my shoulder lightly. I rolled my eyes, a smile tugging at my lips, despite myself. Nah, just not my scene, I guess. I'm more of a quiet nights and good books kind of girl. Ah, a mystery wrapped in an enigma, he quipped, winking at me. I like it. We delved into everything, our majors, our hometowns, our hopes for the future. Lucas was studying architecture, had dreams of designing sustainable buildings. Make the world a little less shitty, you know, he said, passion lighting up his eyes. It was refreshing, talking to someone so different from me yet so similar in many ways. He told me about his mom, how she'd raised him on her own after his dad left. She's a fighter, my mom. Taught me everything I know about not giving up. I found myself opening up about my dad, how he'd been both parents rolled into one. He's my hero, honestly. Worked his ass off to give me a good life. Lucas nodded, understanding flickering in his gaze. Sounds like we both got lucky with the parent lottery, huh? Yeah, I guess we did. I agreed, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the alcohol. As the night wound down, Lucas leaned in, his voice lowering. I don't know about you, but I'm really glad I spilled my drink on you. I laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. Me too, Lucas. Me too. He walked me home that night, the streets quiet and the air crisp around us. When we reached my door, he hesitated, shuffling his feet. So, can I see you again? Maybe without the party and the spilled drinks? I bit my lip, considering. A part of me was screaming to say yes, to dive headfirst into whatever this was. Another part was cautious, wary of getting too close. But looking into Lucas's hopeful eyes, I found myself nodding. Yeah, I'd like that. Fast forward through countless dates, late-night phone calls, and studying sessions together, we were inseparable. College life was good, but having Lucas in it made it great. Before I knew it, graduation rolled around. Walking across that stage, diploma in hand, I spotted Lucas in the crowd, cheering louder than anyone else. Felt like my heart was gonna burst right out of my chest. Life after college was a blur of new beginnings. Landed a job as an accountant, and Lucas kicked off his career in architecture. We were doing it, making our way in the big, wide world. And we were doing it together. One day, out of the blue, life decided to throw us another curveball. I was pregnant. The 2 lines on the test, clear as day. My world stopped for a minute, everything silent around me. When I told Lucas, his reaction was a mix of shock and something else, joy, maybe? He took my hands in his, eyes shining with a mix of emotions. Carrie, this is... wow. We're gonna have a baby. The weight of the moment hung between us, heavy and sweet, all at once. Then, Lucas, ever the straight shooter, said what we were both thinking but hadn't dared to voice yet. Guess it's time to stop messing around, huh? Think about making it official. You know, a wedding. Meeting Lucas's mom, Carol, was like stepping into a hurricane when you've only ever dealt with a light drizzle. Lucas had prepped me, saying she was a bit much sometimes, but that was the understatement of the century. We were at her house, a cozy little place that looked like it belonged in one of those home magazines, all neat and pretty. But the atmosphere? Ice cold, especially after Lucas dropped the baby bomb. Carol just stared at us for what felt like an eternity, her eyes drilling into me. Then, she finally spoke, her voice sharp as a knife. A baby? You're sure it's Lucas's? Lucas looked like he'd been slapped. Mom, what the hell? I was stunned, mouth dry, words stuck in my throat. This was the woman who raised the guy I love? She continued, her gaze never leaving mine. I mean, it's a valid question, Lucas. With her background and all. I felt my face flush with anger. My background? What's that supposed to mean? Carol sighed, as if explaining to a child. Your mother left your family, Carrie. That says something about your character. Lucas jumped in, his tone desperate. Mom, stop it. That's not fair. Carrie's not her mother. But Carol was on a roll, ignoring Lucas. And you, getting pregnant so young. Are you trying to trap my son? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Trap him? We're in this together, Carol. It's not like I planned this on my own. Lucas stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Enough, Mom. This is insane. You're talking about the woman I love and our child. Carol's face softened for a fraction of a second before she went back on the offensive. I'm just looking out for you, Lucas. You have to think about these things before you ruin your life. I was fuming, but Lucas squeezed my hand under the table, a silent plea to stay calm. We've thought about it, Mom. We're getting married. And we'd like your blessing, but we don't need it. Carol scoffed, shaking her head. Marriage. Your kids playing at being adults. Fine, do what you want. But don't expect me to be happy about it. Our wedding was nothing fancy, just a modest gathering with the people who mattered most. My dad was beaming the whole time, practically glowing with pride. But Carol, my new mother-in-law, might as well have been sucking on lemons all evening. Her face was set in a permanent scowl, like she'd walked into the wrong party and couldn't find the exit. At first, after the wedding, I tried to get on Carol's good side, thinking maybe she just needed time to warm up to me. Lucas and I would go over to her place together, but each visit felt like walking into a lion's den. She had this way of talking, dropping little sarcastic comments and laughing them off, but they always landed like punches. Stuff about the baby, like, sure hope the kid gets Lucas's brains, we don't need another runaway in the family. I bit my tongue so much during those visits, it's a wonder I could still talk. But the worst part wasn't the snide remarks, it was how Lucas started acting. He and Carol were thick as thieves, always on the phone or hanging out. And bit by bit, he began to change. It was like he'd absorbed her suspicion and doubt, started looking at me like I was some stranger. One night, he came at me with this gem. Are you sure the baby's mine? You know, given your family history. I stared at him, my jaw on the floor. Are you kidding me right now? You sound just like your mom. He shrugged, a pathetic attempt at looking innocent. It's a valid question, isn't it? I was livid. No, Lucas, it's not. You know me. You know us. How can you even say that? The distance between us grew with each day, each visit to Carol's, each whispered conversation he thought I didn't hear. I stopped going over to her house, couldn't stand the toxicity. Lucas didn't seem to mind, just carried on with their little two-person fan club. One evening, after another solo visit to Carol's, Lucas came home looking troubled. Before he could launch into another one of his interrogations, I cut him off. Lucas, this has to stop. I'm tired of defending myself against accusations and insinuations, especially from you. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in what felt like forever. Carrie, I don't know what's gotten into me. It's just, my mom, she gets in my head. I shook my head, disappointment weighing heavy on my heart. Your mom isn't here, Lucas. It's just you and me. And if we're going to make this work, really work, you need to decide where your loyalties lie. For a brief, shining moment, it felt like I was living in a different world. Carol, my ever-critical mother-in-law, decided to jet off on some extended vacation, leaving us to our own devices for a whole 2 months. You wouldn't believe the change in Lucas. It was like the guy I fell for came back from the dead. We laughed more, talked more, and those nagging doubts and fights just melted away. Being pregnant felt a bit easier without Carol's constant commentary in the background. For a while there, I actually thought we'd turned a corner. Then Carol came back. It was like a switch flipped in Lucas again. The tension, the suspicion, it all came creeping back, like mold in a forgotten corner. She must have been filling his head with all sorts of nonsense the second she got back. I held on to hope, though. Hope that once our daughter was born, things would change. That seeing his child, our child, would snap Lucas out of whatever spell his mom had cast over him. Boy, was I wrong. From the moment our daughter, Lily, entered the world, Carol was on us like a hawk. She'd swoop into our home uninvited, under the guise of helping. But her help was more like a barrage of criticism. "You're holding her all wrong," she'd snap, watching me like I was about to drop Lily on her head. "Her bath is too cold. Are you trying to freeze her?" she'd accuse, sticking a finger in the bathwater like some kind of twisted Goldilocks. And the feeding? According to Carol, I might as well have been trying to poison Lily with the way I was going about it. Nothing I did was right. I couldn't even change a diaper without Carol lamenting how I was setting Lily up for a lifetime of discomfort. Her favorite jab? "It's clear your mother never taught you anything. Look at this place. It's a mess. And you're just lazy." Each word was a knife, and I felt myself bleeding out, bit by bit. Lucas, for his part, was no help. He'd parrot his mother's concerns, adding his own layer of doubt to the mix. One particularly rough day, Carol was on her usual tirade about the state of the house, her voice a grating symphony of dissatisfaction. "This is no environment for a child. It's filthy. And you're just sitting around. What kind of mother are you?" I was at my breaking point. "I'm doing my best, Carol. Maybe if you actually offered help instead of just criticism, things would be different." Her laugh was sharp, dismissive. "Help? Dear, you need more than help. You need a miracle to learn how to take proper care of a child." Lucas walked in just as the words left her mouth, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. "What's going on here?" "Your wife," Carol said, turning her poison-tipped words toward him, "is clueless. It's a wonder Lily is thriving at all." I looked to Lucas, hoping for some sign of support. But all I saw was hesitation, a man torn between his mother and his wife. The night was rough. Lily's tummy was acting up, keeping us both awake till the early hours. Deciding we both needed the rest, I took the day off to lie down with her, hoping she'd feel better soon. But then Carol burst in like a tornado, her voice booming through the house about how dirty it was and that there was nothing to eat. "This place is a mess. And what about dinner? Lucas can't be expected to cook for himself." I was too tired and frazzled to deal with her. "Lucas said he'd handle dinner tonight. It's fine," I mumbled, trying to keep my voice down so Lily wouldn't wake up. Carol wasn't having it. She raised her voice even louder. "He should not have to. It's your job to take care of him. Get up and start cooking." Ignoring her, I went back to the bedroom, hoping she'd get the hint and leave. But no, Carol followed, ranting right into the bedroom about how I was failing as a wife and mother. Fearful her yelling would disturb Lily, I got up, gently took Carol by the arm, and led her towards the door. "Please, just stop. You're going to wake her," I pleaded quietly. That's when she started screaming. "Are you kicking me out? How dare you lay your hands on me?" Lucas came home right at that moment. Seeing me with my hand on his mother, he lost it. "What the hell do you think you're doing to my mom?" he bellowed. Before I could explain, he shoved me. I lost my balance, my head cracking against the edge of the bedside table. Everything went black. Waking up to cold water being splashed on my face was a shock. Carol and Lucas were both standing over me, looking more angry than concerned. Lily's cries filled the air, adding to the chaos. Lucas was livid. "Until you prove that's my daughter, I'm not touching her. Deal with her crying." He practically threw me towards the bedroom. The room spun around me as I tried to stand, my head pounding in pain. I'd never felt so alone. My dad, the gentlest man I knew, had never so much as raised his voice at me. And here was the man I loved, the father of my child, pushing me away like I was nothing. I picked up Lily, holding her close, her cries slowly turning into whimpers. As I rocked her, the reality of what just happened hit me hard. Lucas and his mother had crossed a line I never imagined they would. The next morning, Lucas left for work as if nothing had happened, and I quickly packed my suitcase and called a taxi. The moment I stepped into Dad's house, with Lily cradled against my chest, the weight of the world seemed to crash down on me. "Dad, I didn't know where else to go," I whispered, my voice breaking, feeling the tears I'd held back start to edge their way forward. He didn't say much, just took us in and held me tight, Lily squished between us. "You're safe here," he murmured, his voice a steady rock in the chaos. "Tell me everything." Explaining it all to Dad was like reliving a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. His face grew darker with each word, his anger palpable. "We're going to the police," he decided, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And then, we're putting an end to this." The police station was intimidating, cold, and impersonal. The officer behind the desk looked up as we approached. "Can I help you?" I took a deep breath, Dad's hand on my shoulder grounding me. "I need to report domestic violence." The officer's demeanor changed immediately, his voice softer. "Of course, ma'am. Please, come with me. We'll talk somewhere private." Sitting in that small room, with Dad by my side, I poured everything out to the officer, who listened intently, nodding encouragingly. "It's important we know everything," he assured me after I stumbled over the details, ashamed and scared. When Dad's journalist friend got in touch about the TV segment, I was hesitant. "It's a chance to tell your story, on your terms," Dad encouraged. "You could change things for others." Sitting under the harsh studio lights, facing the host, my stomach was a knot of nerves. "Many are calling you a symbol of courage," the host began. "What made you decide to speak out?" "I found strength I didn't know I had. I realized silence was another form of fear," I said, my voice steady. "I needed to fight back, not just for me, but for Lily. No one should have to go through this." The segment aired, and suddenly, my story was out there, sparking conversations, drawing support from corners I never expected. Lucas's facade crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny, his actions condemned. The court proceedings were a whirlwind. Lucas was found guilty of domestic violence, stripped of any rights to Lily. And in a twist I hadn't seen coming, they ran a DNA test. Turned out, Lily was his, no doubt about it. His baseless accusations, all for nothing. Carol didn't get off scot-free either. The judge hit her with a fine for emotional abuse. It wasn't much, but it was something, a recognition of the hell she'd put me through. After the divorce, I kept my distance from Lucas and his mom, Carol. The last thing I wanted was to hear more excuses or face their denial. But Dad, ever the protector, saw an opportunity for closure, not just for us, but publicly. He arranged for us to confront Lucas and Carol in the same TV show, after which my life changed. Sitting backstage, I felt a storm of emotions. Anger, betrayal, but underneath it all, a flicker of hope for some semblance of justice. Dad squeezed my hand, his silent way of saying, "We've got this." The host was known for not pulling punches, and as we took our seats, I could see Lucas and Carol were uneasy. The audience's murmurs grew quiet as the show began. "Today, we have a story of betrayal, courage, and the pursuit of justice," the host began, setting the stage. He turned to Lucas and Carol. "You've been accused of some serious mistreatment. How do you respond to these allegations?" Lucas stumbled over his words. I didn't realize how far things had gone. "I'm sorry." Carol tried to deflect. "We thought we were doing what was best." The host cut in. "Best? By whose standard? You pushed her to the brink." The audience's reactions ranged from disbelief to anger, their hums and murmurs filling the studio. Then, it was my turn to speak. I don't need their apologies. What's done is done. My focus is on my daughter and giving her a life full of love and security, something they tried to take from us. Lucas looked down, unable to meet my gaze, while Carol seemed to shrink in her seat. The host nodded solemnly. It takes incredible strength to stand in your truth. What message do you hope to send? That justice and kindness always win. That no one should ever feel alone or without options, I said, my voice steady. By the end of the show, Lucas and Carol had publicly apologized, but their words felt hollow. I wasn't looking for their remorse, I was looking for a way to move forward, to show Lily the strength of standing up for oneself. Leaving the studio, Dad put an arm around me. You were amazing out there. Lily's going to grow up knowing how strong her mom is. And he was right. As I looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in my arms, I knew our future was bright. Together, with my dad's unwavering support, we'd build a life defined by love, resilience, and the belief that after every storm, there comes a new dawn. I never thought my life would take a sharp turn at a wedding that wasn't even mine. That day, I was just the girl behind the camera, trying to make a name for myself in the chaotic world of photography. My job was to capture the joy, the tears, and, if I got lucky, the soul of the moment. Little did I know, my soul was about to intertwine with someone else's. The bride and groom were a typical couple, all smiles and dances, lost in their bubble of happiness. I was moving around, clicking away, making sure to get every angle, when I bumped into him, Alex. He was a guest, a friend of the groom's or something. Tall, with a mischievous grin that didn't match the formal wear he was somewhat uncomfortably stuffed into. Whoa, careful there. Wouldn't want you ruining your camera before the cake cutting, he joked, steadying my arm. I rolled my eyes, not really in the mood for banter. Thanks, I guess. I'll manage. He chuckled, not at all deterred. Name's Alex. And you are? Does it matter? I'm just the photographer, I replied, focusing on adjusting my lens rather than his piercing gaze. Just the photographer who captures moments that'll be treasured for a lifetime. Sounds pretty important to me, he quipped, leaning in slightly, curious. I sighed, finally giving him a glance. I'm Mia. And you're blocking my shot. Alex stepped aside, hands raised in surrender, but his smile never wavered. My apologies, Mia. How about I make it up to you by not getting in your way again? Try not to, I muttered, already moving to my next spot, trying to ignore the warmth his smile sparked in me. The wedding went on, and so did our brief encounters. Alex had a knack for popping up wherever I was, each time with a comment or a joke, trying to chip away at my focus. It was annoying. It was also kind of refreshing. As the evening wound down, I found myself outside, taking a breather, when Alex joined me, holding 2 glasses of champagne. Thought you could use one, he said, handing me a glass. I took it, our fingers brushing briefly. Why are you so interested in the photographer? He shrugged, leaning against the railing. Why wouldn't I be? You're interesting. And pretty damn good with that camera. I sipped the champagne, letting the edge of my guard down. Thanks. You're not too bad yourself, for an annoying guest. Annoying, huh? He grinned. I prefer charmingly persistent. We talked more than I expected that night. About photography, about life, about dreams that seemed too big for our current worlds. Alex had this way of making everything seem possible. It was dangerous. It was exhilarating. As the night ended and we said our goodbyes, Alex asked for my number. I hesitated, not sure if I wanted to dive into whatever this was. But the spark in his eyes, the promise of more laughs and shared dreams, had me typing my number into his phone. I'll call you, he said, a statement more than a promise. And call he did. One date turned into many, laughter filled my days, and before I knew it, I was in love. Alex was everything I never knew I needed, supportive, loving, challenging. He made me want to be better, do better. Our whirlwind romance led to a small, intimate wedding, just us and the people who mattered most. A year later, our son, Jake, arrived, turning our duo into a trio, completing our little universe in the bustling heart of the city. Life in the city was a whirlwind of photo shoots, baby giggles, and stolen moments with Alex amidst our busy schedules. But every so often, we'd pack up our little world and head to the suburbs to visit Alex's parents. These trips, meant to be retreats, often felt more like stepping onto a battlefield, where words were weapons and tensions ran high. Alex's dad, George, was a tough nut, old school and hard-edged. The kind of man who believed in hard work above all and wasn't shy about saying so. His wife, Ellen, was softer, trying to smooth over her husband's rougher comments with smiles and changes of subject. The first visit after Jake was born set the tone for what was to become a recurring theme. We'd just settled in, Jake asleep in my arms, when George launched into his usual spiel. "So, Alex, how's the job going? Still at that same place?" George's voice was casual, but his eyes were sharp, probing. Alex shifted uncomfortably, glancing at me before answering. "Yeah, Dad, still there. It's going well." George snorted. "Well, hope you're thinking about the future. Now with the kid and all, you can't afford to be just going well. Need to aim higher, son." I felt Alex tense beside me. I could see him mentally bracing himself, the same old argument brewing. Ellen, sensing the mood shift, hurriedly interjected. "George, let's not start with that now. Can't we just enjoy the visit?" But George was on a roll. "And what about you, Mia? Still taking pictures of other people's weddings? Thought you'd move on to something bigger by now." I bit my lip, holding back the retort that it was more than just taking pictures. Instead, I forced a smile. "I love what I do, George. It's fulfilling, and it works with our schedule." Yeah, but is it enough? You two need to think about stability, for Jake's sake," George countered, his tone implying that our choices were anything but stable. It wasn't long before another visit rolled around. This time, George's health had taken a turn for the worse. The atmosphere was somber, Ellen worn out from worry, and George, though quieter, still managed to jab at Alex's career choices. "Working hard or hardly working, son?" George coughed out, a shadow of his usual confrontational self. Alex, looking weary, tried to keep the peace. "Working hard, Dad. Always working hard." I watched the exchange, a lump forming in my throat. It was clear George's time was running out, and yet here we were, stuck in this loop of criticism and defense. After George passed away, the house felt not just emptier but quieter, like the very walls were mourning him. Ellen, now a widow, was a shadow of her bustling, energetic self. It was hard watching her go through the motions, trying to adjust to a life without her partner of so many years. I made it a point to call her often, lending an ear, or just sharing the day-to-day happenings to break through her solitude. She appreciated it, I could tell, even if our conversations were often peppered with her sighs and reminiscing about George. During one of these calls, Ellen mentioned that Laura, Alex's sister, decided to move back home. The news hit Alex like a ton of bricks. He was livid, cursing under his breath about Laura's real intentions. "Can you believe her? Moving in with Mom, just like that? It's clear as day, she's eyeing the inheritance. Always the opportunist, waiting to swoop in." Alex fumed over dinner, his fork hitting the plate a little too hard. I was taken aback by his anger. "Alex, isn't she just trying to be there for your mom? After all, Ellen is going through a lot right now." He scoffed, shaking his head. "Mia, you don't know Laura like I do. She's slick, always playing the caring daughter card when it suits her. And now, with Dad gone, she's probably got her sights set on whatever she can get her hands on." It was surprising, hearing Alex talk this way about his sister. I knew they had their differences, but this was a side of him I hadn't seen. It made me uneasy, the ease with which he painted Laura in such dark strokes. The shift from our city apartment to Ellen's suburban home was jarring. One day we were in the heart of the hustle, the next, surrounded by 2 quiet streets and the ever-present shadow of George's absence. This move, sprung on us by Alex, wasn't welcomed by any party involved, least of all Ellen. "Alex, what on earth are you thinking? This house is my space to grieve, not a hotel for your family," Ellen had protested over the phone, her voice a mix of shock and irritation. But Alex was determined, painting it as a grand gesture of support. "Mom, it's settled. We're coming. You shouldn't be alone in that big house anyway." I watched him pace our living room, phone pressed to his ear, marveling at his stubbornness. My input? Seemingly unnecessary. By the time he hung up, it was a done deal, despite Ellen's reservations and my own unease. The day we moved in, Ellen greeted us with a tight smile, her home now invaded by our clutter and noise. Laura was there too, her welcome far less strained, surprisingly. "Hey, the more the merrier, right?" she quipped, eyeing our boxes with an indifference that irked Alex. "Mia, can you believe this?" Alex grumbled as we unpacked in what used to be George's study. "Laura's acting like she owns the place." I sighed, setting a framed photo on the desk. "She's trying to help her mom, Alex. We're all adjusting here." Adjusting was an understatement. The dynamics within the house shifted like sand underfoot. Ellen, once the matriarch, seemed to shrink, her voice lost amid the chaos of our resettled lives. Laura, on the other hand, floated through her days, contributing little and observing much. Dinner times were the worst. Ellen would cook, a silent figure moving through her kitchen, while Laura somehow always dodged the task. Alex and I would offer to help, but Ellen's polite refusals left us sidelined, spectators in our own lives. "Why don't you let me cook tomorrow, Ellen?" I'd offer, only to be met with a weary smile. "Oh, dear, no need. I've got it. You take care of Jake and your work. That's enough." And so, the pattern continued, with me feeling more like a guest than a member of the household. It didn't take long for the financial arrangements to rear their ugly head. Alex, ever the man of the house, took it upon himself to dictate terms. "Mia, I'll handle the groceries. You can cover the utilities, all right?" he declared one evening, as if it were the most natural division of responsibilities. I blinked, taken aback. "Sure, I guess. But should we talk about this with Ellen? It's her house, after all." Alex waved off my concerns. "No need. Mom's got enough on her plate. We're helping out." Helping out felt a lot like taking over. My photography gigs became my escape, a chance to breathe beyond the suffocating walls of a home that wasn't ours. Yet, even as I immersed myself in work, the home front demanded more. Laura's busy schedule somehow justified her lack of contribution, leaving me to pick up the slack. "Mia, can you believe Laura? Always too busy to help out. It's all on you and Mom," Alex would rant, oblivious to the irony of his words. I'd nod, biting back my frustration. "Yeah, too busy. I noticed. It wasn't just the chores or the finances. It was the weight of living under a roof filled with unspoken grievances and mourning." Ellen's grief was a constant presence, her occasional tears a reminder of the life she lost. Laura's indifference and Alex's growing bitterness added layers to an already complex living situation. 2 years had melted away since we moved into Ellen's place, and life had found its peculiar rhythm. Ellen, though frilier with each passing day, never lost her spirit, always finding a bit of strength to help me with Jake, who was now 3 and as curious as a cat. He had this thing for gadgets, mimicking me whenever I was on my phone or working with my camera. So, thinking it might fuel his curiosity in a good way, I got him a kitty smartphone. It was a hit. He was snapping photos of everything from his half-eaten breakfast to his toys strewn across the floor, and using the voice recorder like he was on some secret mission. One day, Alex decided to take Jake for a walk, a bit of father-son bonding time. They came back with Jake chattering nonstop about the ducks they saw. As I was cleaning up, I spotted Jake's toy phone left on the couch, a little smudged. I picked it up, intending to give it a quick wipe, when my finger accidentally hit the play button on one of the voice recordings. What I heard next stopped me cold. It was Alex and Laura, their voices clear as day, talking in a way I'd never imagined. They weren't at each other's throats, as they'd have us believe. No, they were in cahoots, laying out plans that chilled me to the bone. Alex's voice cut through first. "We've got to be smarter about this, Laura. Mom's no fool, she's starting to ask questions." Laura's reply was sharp. "Chill, Alex. You worry too much. We just need to keep up the act a little longer." My heart raced. Act? What act? Alex was confessing to Laura about losing his job because he couldn't be bothered to show up, admitting he'd been mooching off me ever since. But what twisted the knife was their scheme against Ellen. Laura was ranting about Ellen's plans to move to a fancy nursing home, how they needed to stop her before she drained what they saw as their inheritance. Their plot was sinister, talking about declaring Ellen incompetent, all to grab her property. Or is it better to get rid of her physically altogether? The recording cut off abruptly, leaving a silence that roared in my ears. I sat there, the phone still in my hand, my mind racing. Betrayal wasn't a strong enough word for this. This was cold, calculated deceit, a stab in the back from the people I considered family. And yet, as furious and shaken as I was, I knew I couldn't confront Alex right away. No, I needed to play this smart, for Ellen's sake, for Jake's. I couldn't let on that I knew. So, I swallowed the storm inside me, and went about the evening as if nothing had changed. Dinner was a blur. I nodded and smiled robotically, watching Alex and Laura bicker over trivialities, a performance I now knew was just for show. I had to tell Ellen. She needed to know the depth of deceit circling around her. When I played the recording for Ellen, her reaction was a mix of resignation and sadness. "I had my suspicions, dear," she sighed, "but I never had the proof. And to think, I've been helping them out financially whenever they asked." Ellen's resolve firmed up as we talked. "I've been considering moving into a nursing home, actually. I have the savings for it. But now, hearing this, we need to act, and fast, before they realize we're onto them." We called in a lawyer when Alex and Laura were out, ensuring our plans remained under wraps. Ellen was clear and direct, instructing the lawyer to change her will to exclude both Alex and Laura. The lawyer nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. A few days later, during a family dinner that was tense at best, Ellen dropped her bombshell. "I've decided to give you the house," she announced, watching as Alex and Laura's faces lit up with greedy anticipation. But then, she added the condition about paying for their 2-year stay, to the tune of $186,000. The smug smiles vanished, replaced by shock and outrage. "You can't be serious. We're not paying for anything," Alex exploded, with Laura chiming in, echoing his disbelief. Ellen remained unfazed. "Then I'll see you in court for conspiring against me," she countered, her voice steady. Their protests died down when I played the damning recording from Jake's phone. The shift in their demeanor was immediate, from outrage to fear, then to turning on each other, trying to shift the blame. Ellen's disappointment was palpable. "I don't want you two around anymore," she declared, her decision final. It was then I laid the divorce papers in front of Alex. "I'm done supporting you. You've lied, not just on me, but on your own mother," I said, my voice firm, betraying none of the turmoil inside. Alex's attempts at excuses were pathetic, and Laura was no better, both of them realizing too late the game was up. "I can't be with someone who'd plot against his own mother," I continued. "We're leaving." The dust had barely settled from the explosion of truths, before I found myself packing up what felt like a lifetime's worth of memories into a few boxes. Jake, bless his heart, was too young to understand the storm swirling around us, his main concern being whether his toys were coming along. "Mommy, can Bear and Mr. Dino come too?" Jake asked, holding up his worn stuffed bear and the plastic dinosaur that had seen better days. "Of course, sweetie. They're part of the family," I reassured him, forcing a smile as I packed his treasures into a box marked Jake's stuff. The apartment we moved into was a stark contrast to Ellen's spacious house, but it was ours, a sanctuary from the chaos we'd left behind. The first few nights, the silence was deafening, a reminder of the void left by the absence of familial bickering and the undercurrent of deceit. A week later, Ellen, bless her heart, decided it was time to move to that fancy nursing home she'd been talking about. Said she needed a change of scenery, and honestly, who could blame her? I went over to help her pack up her things. It was the least I could do after all we'd been through together. Alex was there too, hovering around, trying to act like he wanted to make things right between us. As if a few sorry words could fix the heap of lies he buried us under. I couldn't even bring myself to look him straight in the eye without feeling a mix of anger and pity. Just gave him this look that said, "Save it," and kept on packing. The divorce wasn't easy, but then again, what divorce is? The judge ended up making Alex pay me $50,000, compensation for all the years he'd been living off me while playing happy families. Felt like a small win, but a win nonetheless. A few months down the line, Alex and Laura finally coughed up the $186,000 they owed Ellen for staying in her house, after taking out loans against it. Ellen didn't waste any time putting that money straight into her own account, making sure it was out of reach from those two. Watching Ellen settle into that nursing home, a place she could finally call her own without the constant drama, made me think about what's really important. I just wish it hadn't come to this, she told me as we finished setting up her room. Me too, Ellen. But we're here now, and we've got to make the best of it, I said, trying to stay strong for the both of us. Settling into our new life wasn't easy, but Jake and I were making the most of it. Our apartment might have been small, but it was ours, and that made all the difference. I started picking up more photography gigs, each click of the camera a step towards rebuilding our lives. One day, as I was sorting through photos from a recent shoot, Jake came up to me, his little face screwed up in concentration. "Mommy, when can we visit Grandma Ellen again? I miss her." "Soon, buddy," I replied, ruffling his hair. "How about this weekend? We can make a day of it." His face lit up, and in that moment, I knew no matter how tough things got, we'd be okay as long as we had each other. Visiting Ellen became our little ritual. Despite the luxury surrounding her in the nursing home, she always said our visits were the highlight of her week. It was during one of these visits that things took an unexpected turn. Alex and Laura were there, looking more run down than I remembered. The desperation was clear in their eyes, a far cry from the confident facade they used to put on. They were practically on their knees, begging Ellen for money, saying the old house was falling apart and they had nowhere else to turn. Ellen was firm, her voice steady as she refused them. "I've made my decision. The rest of what I have is going to Mia and Jake. You two have done enough damage." I couldn't help but feel a mix of vindication and sadness hearing that. Alex and Laura turned to me, their eyes blazing with anger. "This is all you're doing. You've turned her against us," Alex hissed, his voice low but filled with venom. Laura chimed in, "Yeah, playing the victim and now look, living off what should have been ours." Ellen's patience snapped. "Enough. If you two don't stop this nonsense, I'll take that recording to the police." "Don't think I won't do it." The threat of the recording being handed to the authorities was enough to send them packing. Their exit was swift, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. Ellen turned to me, her gaze softening. "I'm sorry you had to witness that, Mia. But I've seen enough to know where my support is best placed." I was taken aback by her words, a lump forming in my throat. "Ellen, thank you. It means the world to us, but we don't want you to feel like you owe us anything." She shook her head. "I owe you more than you know. You and Jake, you're my family. And it's high time I looked out for my real family." As we left the nursing home that day, I couldn't shake off the mixture of emotions swirling inside me. Relief, gratitude, but also a renewed determination to build a better future for Jake, one not shadowed by the deceit and betrayal of the past. Me and Jake, we kept visiting Ellen in that fancy nursing home she moved into. It was nice, seeing her in a good place, away from all the drama. But then, one day, she dropped a bombshell on us during one of our visits. "The house, it's gone," Ellen said out of the blue, her voice shaking a bit. "The bank took it because of the debts Alex and Laura racked up." I could see the pain in her eyes, the disappointment. It was like she was questioning everything she ever did as a mother. "I can't believe it's come to this. After everything I tried to do for them." "Ellen, this ain't on you," I told her, trying to make her see reason. "You did everything a mother could. It's their choices that got them here, not yours." She looked at me, then at Jake, who was busy with a coloring book we'd brought along. "At least I've got Jake," she said after a moment, a small smile breaking through. "He's a blessing, Mia. You both are." It was hard, watching her grapple with the mess her children had left behind. But in those moments, I saw the strength in her, the resilience. She had faced her share of battles, but she wasn't letting this defeat her. As for Alex and Laura, they vanished, leaving a trail of debts and broken relationships in their wake. Ellen didn't even know where they'd ended up, and honestly, I didn't care to know either. They chose their path, and now they had to walk it, wherever it led. "Ellen, you've got us," I reminded her as we got ready to leave that day. "Me and Jake, we're your family too, and we're not going anywhere." She hugged us both, holding on a little longer than usual. "Thank you, Mia, for everything." Driving back to our apartment, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. The road hadn't been easy, but we were making it through, one day at a time. And through it all, we found something worth holding on to: each other.